All right. Thank you again for joining us this evening. I'm Tina Norris. I'm the Family Engagement Specialist here at PTSI, and I want to thank you for joining me for this webinar series. Tonight, our speaker will be Dr. Sephora Levi Shackelford. She is the founder and behavior and education consultant for the Creative Approach Development Center located in Richmond, Virginia. She was inspired by her experience as being a special needs sibling and a parent, and she is a strong advocate in the fields of disability, mental health, and education. She assists individuals and families with setting up systems and learning new skills to overcome challenges and behaviors that interfere with reaching goals and increasing independence. She also provides training to businesses and organizations to help them better understand how to support people with disabilities and mental health impairments and those who support them. Sephora has a doctorate in education and certifications in positive behavior supports, disability leadership, and autism spectrum disorders. She has spoken and trained across the country on these topics and serves on many nonprofit and state boards. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shackelford. Thank you so much for being with us.
All right. Thank you, Tina. Thank you for that great opening and welcome. And thank you to all of you for joining me this evening. I know it's a little late and we all have such long days with us wearing our many hats throughout the day. So I appreciate you guys tuning in this evening. As Tina mentioned, this is a three-part series. And tonight I am going to be focusing on truancy and chronic absenteeism. So thank you for joining me for that. So to get started, again, hello and welcome. Tina just read my bio, but again, I'm Dr. Sephora Levi Shackelford. Clients and colleagues call me Dr. Z, and you're welcome to refer to me as Dr. Z as well. As Tina mentioned, I am a special needs sibling as well as a parent. I have 4 children, 3 of them on the autism spectrum, and my youngest also has a rare form of Down syndrome and a couple of other comorbid diagnoses. And from personal experiences led to me in 2015 starting the Creative Approach Development Center in Richmond as an opportunity to share different things that I've learned over the years to help other families and other individuals just, develop meaningful goals and outcomes so that they can live, people with disabilities and mental health diagnoses can live lives just like their peers who do not have these diagnoses. I definitely want to thank PTSI for inviting me to present these different topics. This is, I think, probably my 4th or 5th time that I have presented for PTSI, and it's always a pleasure to work with them and also to attend their different trainings. They have not only this, but a wide variety of trainings related to education and support services in the state. So be sure to check out their calendar and sign up for their newsletters as well to stay on top of what they have coming up. So this presentation, and for the others, for those who have not joined me for a training or webinar before, pretty laid back. Again, I'm a mom of 4 children, so you have to be, right? Just a little bit of housekeeping, go ahead and relax. Like I said, I understand it's been a long day. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. I believe that the way that this session has been set up is that your questions will be in the chat box, and towards the end of the presentation, they will share them and I will do my best to answer them. And if it's something I do not have an immediate answer for, I will get contact information and find that answer for you and send it to you. Please make yourself comfortable. It's very relaxed and informal. And again, it's the end of the day, so grab yourself a drink and a snack, or if you haven't had your dinner yet, your dinner. I have my tea and water with me to keep me hydrated. So let's get started. Wanted to share some info about Creative Approach Development Center, or CADC. As Tina mentioned, it is in Richmond, Virginia, but I actually do provide services all over the state. I am a Medicaid provider where I provide the therapeutic consultations, which are the behavior modifications and supports. So I can provide those for anybody with the DD waivers. I provide lots of work groups and events and clubs for those with IDD and other diagnoses, to provide them with training and resources, but then as an opportunity to socialize and get out of their normal routines. I provide a variety of training programs that focus on employment readiness, social skills, health and wellness, as well as self-advocacy. I do webinars like this and online courses for providers, schools, self-advocates, members of the community, and focus heavily on educating the community about inclusivity, teamwork, and then training on neurodivergency and things like that. So my main areas of focus are mental health, IDD, dual diagnosis, and then the leadership development. So for this webinar, I will again be focusing on truancy and chronic absenteeism. And these are the different topics that I will be touching on. So talking about the importance of school attendance, excused versus unexcused absences, and talking more and providing a good definition about what that means. Talking about what chronic absenteeism is, as well as truancy, and then the differences between the two, and as well as why they are problems. We'll get into the main reasons for truancy, why it's important to find out the reason for the behavior. And then I will share some tips on how to check your current school system for those of you joining the webinar that are in the schools, to kind of see where you are and to see if there are any potential pitfalls that will lead a student to engage in truant or chronic absenteeism. And then talking about an absentee team and what members should be on that team, and then some suggestions on how to get a student back in the classroom who may have had a lot of absences. So the importance of school attendance, I'm sure it's pretty obvious, right? The reason why it's important for students to attend school is so that they can learn. The more a student misses school, the more information that they do not get. And even if they do receive the schoolwork and homework and try to do the makeup work at home, it's not the same as when they're in the classroom and they have the opportunity to ask questions and get an immediate response and model behavior from observing their peers in the classroom. So that's one reason why it's important for the students to be in the actual classroom setting, is because it leads to the better academic outcomes. Another reason is because it allows the teacher to identify any kind of learning challenges that the student may be experiencing quicker. So if the student is not in the classroom and they are struggling with a topic or a concept, the teacher is not able to see what's going on, other than maybe a homework that's turned in, but that doesn't allow the teacher to actually see the student in progress. So it's important for the students to be in a classroom because it allows the teacher the opportunity to observe how they actually work through the different procedures and where they may need some additional supports. Another reason why it's important for students to be in school is because the school budgets and funding is tied to the daily attendance. And if there's a lot of students that are missing a large number of days, it can make predicting that school budget more difficult for the upcoming year. And then when it comes to receiving funding, it can decrease the amount of funding that you receive for that upcoming school year. So those are some reasons why it's important for students to attend. So now we're going to get into absences, and we have two that we hear the most. We hear of excused absences and unexcused absences. And excused absences, I think, are pretty uh, easy to understand. Those are days of school, an entire day of school that the student misses with the parents or the guardian's knowledge, and they have a reason that is accepted by the school administration. And I'm gonna get into acceptable reasons and stuff in a little bit, a couple of slides down the line, but that is what an excused absence is. And an unexcused absent is when the student is absent for the entire day, they don't attend for the entire day, and the parent or guardian didn't know about it, or they may know about it, but they didn't agree to it. So they didn't grant the student permission to miss school. And then it also includes situations where the parent or guardian was aware that the student wasn't attending school, but the reason was not something that was considered acceptable by according to the guidelines. So that's what unexcused absences are. So now we get into the chronic absenteeism. And in Virginia, chronic absenteeism is when a student misses 10% or more of the school year. So our school years are 180 days. 10% of that would be missing 18 days or more throughout the one school year. And this averages out to about 2 to 3 days a month. And the reason why I put a highlight on that is because, you may have a student, or your child may be the student that, misses a day here and there, and it doesn't seem like it's such a big deal because it was just 2 days this month, and next month it was just 2 days. But over the period of the whole school year, it adds up. And again, it may seem like it's just 1 day, but it's valuable information that they're missing that cannot be made up. Again, even if the assignment comes home with them, they're still not getting that instruction and that opportunity to observe their peers and model and just, problem solve and work on mastering the different concepts. Important note is that chronic absenteeism is made up of both excused and unexcused absences. And again, I put emphasis on this because a lot of times parents tend to focus on the unexcused absences, and they feel that as long as they have an excuse and they give the notice, their student missing multiple days is okay. But it does count towards that chronic absenteeism total. So if the parent decides that they are having a family vacation and the student is going to miss 5 days, and they've given the notice ahead of time, and they got the homework assignments ahead of time, all of that is great, but those 5 days still go towards the chronic absenteeism count. And then another thing that's included is any out of school suspension. So that is included in that count as well, leading up to the 18 or more days. What is not included is if a student starts the school year in the middle of the school year, the days that they did not attend doesn't count. If the student is sick or has something going on where it's been agreed for them to do or receive the homebound instruction, which is the third part of this series, I believe, those days don't count. And then if the student is in school suspension or in any other kind of in-school disciplinary situation, that doesn't count towards the absences as well. So just wanted to break that down. So as far as the number of days that a student can miss and what's considered an excused absence, all of that varies by the state. It's not something that's like an overarching theme across the country. Each state decides on the number of days that counts towards being chronically absent or truant. So that's done at the state level. And the state also makes it mandatory that students from ages 5 through 18 attend school. So that's also done at the state level. Again, in Virginia, it's 10% of missed days that's considered as chronic absenteeism, but then in other states, they have it as low as 5% or as high as 15%. So again, it varies across the country, but again, for Virginia, it is the 10%. And then, so that's at the state level. And then at your local level or your district level, the school boards break that down a little bit more. And actually, I'm sorry, the state level decides the response to the truancy and the chronic absenteeism. And then your local school board and jurisdiction is the one who decides on the number of days that are considered chronic absenteeism, as well as what counts as an excused absence. And I just want to point out that, you know, because we live in a country that has many different religious beliefs and faiths, that it's really important for each school district to look at the calendar and look at the different religious holidays that a student may miss from school, and try to think of, you know, some ways to build those into days that don't count against them for missing, even though it is excused absence if they miss because of religious holiday. It still, you know, counts as an absence and goes towards that chronic absenteeism. So, you know, just a reminder of the importance of taking into consideration how diverse your school system is, and different holidays or religious events that a student may have to miss school for. So now I will get into truancy. And when looking up truancy, you'll see that there really isn't a standard national definition. This is something that also varies by the state, but as a common definition, it's agreed that truancy is when a student leaves a class or the school without permission from their parent or guardian, the teacher, or a school administrator. So that is agreed upon across the country. Another thing that is agreed upon is that truancy is when a student misses a day of school without the knowledge or permission of the parent or guardian. So it's missing that school day, and it's also leaving early, or even coming late. So that's what the definition is. But again, it's not like a standard, you know, universal definition that we have. So there's two different levels to truancy. We have habitual, which is, again, depending by the state, a specific number of unexcused absences that occur either consecutively or they're broken up throughout the year. And what happens with this is when the student misses this number of school days, they're going to get that phone call home so that to make sure that the parent is informed about the situation. And then this is also the opportunity to try to talk and see what is the reason for these different absences and what kind of systems can be put into place to try to decrease it. And then the chronic truancy is when, after that action has occurred with the habitual truancy, where you've had the meeting and you've come up with the plan and everything, the student continues to miss days of school. And when it gets to that chronic level, that's when we can start referring to some legal supports to try to really put emphasis on the importance of the student attending school. So important notes about truancy and chronic absenteeism is that across the nation, there's currently about 16% of the student population, which averages out to about 8 million students that are in that chronically absent category. That is a lot. And then truancy is generally used, is a term that's generally used for the older students. And then for the younger students, like in elementary, we use the term chronic absenteeism. And the main reason for that is because when you're a little kid, it's really hard to just kind of skip school, right? Parents pretty much know where their little guys are. It's usually like the middle school and the high school level that can, you know, sneak out of school or stay home after mom or dad leaves for the day for work, and they just don't, you know, catch the bus or whatever. So when we're talking about older students, we tend to use that word truancy. And then for the younger, it's chronic absenteeism. And again, it's for students who miss that 10% or more of the school year. So the question is, why is truancy and chronic absenteeism a problem? And we kind of touched on this a little bit ago when we were talking about the importance of the student being in the classroom to get the instruction. But the research shows that direct correlation to attendance and academic performance. So the more students miss from the classroom, the more information they miss, which leads to different academic gaps. And as the student advances academically, those gaps, intensify. So I always like to use the example of, with each grade, you're kind of building that foundation, and then you build another layer on top of it. So if you have a shaky foundation, when you go for that next level, those different gaps and stuff are going to become clearer because your next level is not going to be steady. And that's exactly why school attendance is important, because it decreases the likelihood of academic gaps developing. We see in the research that students that are chronically absent or truant have a higher rate of having to repeat their school grades. So because they don't meet the attendance requirement as well as their academic performance, they get left back and have to repeat that grade. Once they get into the higher grades, we're seeing higher levels of dropout rates. And then, of course, we're seeing the lower levels of the graduation rates. And another thing that the research shows is that with the chronic absenteeism and truancy, it's higher expulsion rates. And that is because, as I mentioned before with the funding, one of the data samples that schools collect and report as a way to receive their funding is that average daily attendance. So if you have a student that is chronically absent and it's really bringing down your data, after a certain number of days, and after trying to develop the different plans and the student not, complying with the plan, or the parent not, trying to help the student meet those different goals that you set, it's very likely that the school will go ahead and remove that, unenroll that student or expel them to prevent their missed days from throwing off that ADA or that average daily attendance more. So that is another reason why this is a big problem. So now what I'm going to do, this is a very short video from the Department of Education that they made a couple of years ago in attempts to educating parents and caregivers about the importance of attending school. So I just wanted to show this video. It's about 2 minutes because I thought it was a really cute way that it was explained. And if anybody wants the link and stuff, just, send, I guess put the question in the chat box and stuff, and I'll make sure that when the recording goes out, I can send a link for this video too, if this is something that you would like to share with your school faculty or with parents. So I'm going to go ahead and play it now.
I am 6 years old and I'm in first grade. I like going to school, but some days I have to miss school. Sometimes my asthma's bad or I just need to rest. My mom always tries her best, but sometimes I have to miss school because things don't always go as planned. If I miss too many days of school, I probably won't be able to read, write, or do math like my friends. What
Okay, I hope everybody was able to hear that. Unfortunately, even though it did come from the Department of Education, they did not have closed captioning on it. But again, I did come across that video, and I just, really liked how they presented the issue. And again, if anybody's interested in receiving that link, just put it in the chat, and I'll be sure to include that when Tina emails the recording. All right, so we're going to continue the discussion about why chronic absenteeism and truancy is a problem. And we talked about how it's an issue while the student is in school, but the bigger picture shows that this can lead to lifelong challenges. Again, the research shows that students that are often classified as being truant or fall in the category of chronic absenteeism, when they become adults, they are more likely to engage in substance abuse. We see more behavioral challenges and delinquency. We see more gang activity, more of the mental health issues, mental illness, and this also includes depression, as well as suicidal ideation and attempts. We see sexual activity occurring at an earlier age, and the students that fall in this category often have higher number of partners. So we see more of that promiscuity. We see a poorer physical health, more poverty, incarceration, and then it becomes it's like a torch passed on to the next generation because of the challenges that they had in school. Often it leads to that negative mindset about school, and it's carried over into the next generation. And it's very likely to see challenges with the next generation, as far as school attendance and performance. And I just listed down here, if anybody wants some more information about this and some access to the research about how these two issues cause lasting effects, feel free to check out these different resources. And again, I can send some more. All right, so let's see if I can get this. So now we're looking at some of the causes for the chronic absenteeism and truancy, and the research kind of groups it into four main areas. The number one would be school challenges. And when they looked at school challenges, they found that it was because of like poor attitudes or a low or poor school morale, overcrowding, high teacher turnover rates, inconsistencies with school policies and rules because of a high turnover rate, the lack of recognition of the different learning styles and the different needs. So the students feel like school is just not for them because they're not getting it. A lack of funding we see in schools in like the inner city areas that don't receive as much funding as those in the more affluent areas. They may not have the funding for specific learning resources, especially for diverse learning styles, and then programs to help students feel more engaged and connected with their learning and the curriculum. And then finding schools to be just too strict and too rigid are the main reasons that schools are listed for a cause for the chronic absenteeism or truancy. The next category would be family challenges. And in this category, we find a lack of understanding about the importance of attendance and how attendance impacts the student's academic performance. And again, this may be because the parent just is not aware, or they feel that as long as they have a valid reason, it's not a big deal. The big deal is when it's an unexcused absence. Or they may have had a bad experience themselves during their school years, so they have that negative attitude, like I was talking about earlier with the lifelong effects. A parent may be struggling with mental illness or physical illness. A parent may be struggling with substance abuse. A lack of supervision or consistency in the home. again, the parents' lack of education, or their negative experiences in school, which kind of makes their opinion of school and the importance of it, a little less supportive. We have parents that have heavy work schedules. And tying in with that, if a parent has a heavy work schedule, they may need an older sibling to stay at home so that they can babysit for the younger siblings, or if there's a sick sibling or a sibling with a disability or something, some of the older students may be pulled to stay at home to help out. And then, another thing may be struggling because a parent is facing some legal challenges or is incarcerated. So these are just some main ways that family challenges can affect a student's attendance. The next is the financial challenge, which does tie in with the family, but lack of transportation. We have students that have a lack of housing or they're moving frequently, food insecurities, lack of access to clean clothes or weather appropriate clothes. Parents, again, with a single parent household, so they have a lower income and working the long hours and not able to afford childcare for the little guys. So they need the older sibling. And then, those issues as well for parents working multiple jobs. And then the fourth category is the challenges from the actual student. And one of those could be that they're having that learning difficulty because they have a different learning style, or they have a learning disability, or some other type of cognitive or developmental delay that makes learning a challenge for them. We have a lot of students that have different medical challenges. We have a lot of students with different mental health struggles, especially today with everything going on with the pandemic and the different social injustices and bullying, and the list goes on and on. So students just feeling overwhelmed, depressed, or anxious and struggling with their own mental illnesses can be a reason for them to be missing school. Their lack of understanding about the importance of attendance. And I just want to point out here that I think when we think of truancy and chronic absenteeism, we kind of think about the student that isn't performing well. But looking at this bullet point here, this can also be the student that's just knocking it out of the park, and they feel like, I don't need to attend school because I get it, I'm doing really well. So again, keep that in mind, that the student that may be having these challenges may not necessarily look like that kind of image that pops into our head when we have this discussion, and the importance of kind of looking at all the students and connecting with all the students to see what they have going on in their lives as much as you can, and identify any ways that you can support them. The student may be missing school because they're dealing with being a bully. And again, in today's society, it's not like when I was in the school back in the 80s, when we had bullies, you just, dealt with them when they were in school and when you were on the school bus. But nowadays with social media and cell phones and stuff, bullying occurs 24/7, 365. So you may not notice the bullying going on in the school setting, but it could be going on in, the social media world or something. So again, it's really taking that time to, put on that inspector hat and really try to identify what the different challenge is, so you can try to help as much as possible. We have students, again, this is more popular too with things that have been going on with the pandemic, but there's students that are not coming to class because they're working as a way to support the family. You may have students that are not coming to school because they're being abused at home, and between dealing with that mentally and trying to hide some of the physical aspects of that, they don't show up to class. And then the students themselves suffering from substance abuse as a way to cope with something that's going on in their life. So I hope that these different reasons in these categories show that there's a large, mixed multitude of reasons why a student may not be coming to school. And it's not always that same, student that we see when we look at TV and documentaries and stuff about poor academic performance. This can be any student. Any student can have any of these problems. So it's really important, again, to not just assume because the A student is missing 2 days of school here and 3 days of school there that nothing is going on. They can be experiencing these same challenges. So it's really important to check up with the parent and caregiver and talk with the student and try to figure out what's going on. All right, so some important notes from this section is that I just went through 4 different categories and a lot of examples, and the list goes on more than that. That was just some that I, just kind of put down from a quick brainstorm session after, doing my research. But some important things to remember is that students that have more than one risk factor are more likely to miss school. I mean, that makes sense, right? The more you have going on, the harder it is to keep up with things that are going on in school and to attend school. Students living in the low-income communities are more likely to have multiple risk factors compared to their peers in more affluent communities. And I think that makes sense because we know the different struggles that these students face with having the lower income and the struggles that they face because their schools may not have the best resources and opportunities. But again, I just want to remind everyone that it's not just these students. All right, it's more likely that it can happen, but it's not just these students. It can be any student. So please, again, talk with all your students and try to figure out if they're okay and what's going on. And then another important fact is that for the elementary students, the categories that they fall into more are the family and the financial challenges rather than like the student challenge, unless they have a disability or a medical illness. It's usually family/financial challenges, which is the reason why they're missing school. Whereas with the high school students, it can be the school or their personal struggles as well. So just wanted to point out those facts. All right. Take a quick sip of my tea. Okay. So again, why is it important to find out what the rationale is or the student's reason is for missing school? Well, I mentioned it a couple of times. It's because it can have those lifelong effects on the student's quality of life, right? Because it's going to affect their performance in school. And, that later on can lead to what type of job they get, what type of housing they get, and so forth. So it's not just a situation that's bad for this year. It will stick around for a very long time. Another main reason, and I feel like this is one of the most important reasons, is because a student missing school like this can mean something is going on at home or in school and that the students need help. So I feel that it's important to look into it and to find the reasoning to make sure that it's not something the student is going through alone and they're not getting access to a potential resource. Finding out the reason can help to interrupt the school to prison pipeline. It is a fact that with truancy, especially when it gets to that chronic truancy level, after we've had like the meetings and put the plan into place and the student still engages in the truant behaviors, the next level is criminal charges and fines. So not only for the parent, but it can also be for the student. So if we're starting out a student, 15, 16, 17 years old, and they're, facing these types of legal challenges, that really can accelerate the school to prison pipeline for them. And again, the lower ADA or the daily attendance numbers, if they're low, it has the potential of interfering with the school funding and stuff. So these are just some reasons why it's important to really investigate, figure out what's going on, and try to work with the team to come up with an action plan to correct it. So now that we talked about the what and the why, I will get into the how. How do we address this, right? Because on those slides, a few slides back, I mentioned that this is a huge problem across the nation. It's not just something that we're seeing here in Richmond, Virginia, or in a rural county of Virginia, or in Virginia, period. It is across the nation where we are seeing 16% of students engaging in chronic absenteeism and truancy. So this is a huge issue that needs to be addressed. And everybody's kind of scratching their heads and saying, well, how do we do this? So these next slides are just some tips for schools mainly, and for the parents that are on this webinar tonight. You can, welcome to take notes and share some of this with the school board or with your school administration as a way to kind of try to help out with the challenge. But the first thing to do is to look at your school's data, look at that ADA, look at the students that are missing lots of days of school, and then talk with them and their families or their parents or caregivers, and try to figure out what is going on. Why are they missing these days of school and missing class like this? Once you start getting that information, now you need to cross-check it with your school and your system and try to identify some of those holes that make it easier for the students to engage in this behavior. So one way is to assess your school's relationship with the community, because one of the main reasons when we talk about a student's challenges leading to truancy and chronic absenteeism is that they are experiencing physical or oral or mental health issues. So is this because the student doesn't have access to health care? If that's the case, look at your school. Do you have access to nursing staff in your school? If not, have you spoken with different community health programs and got that information out to students and families so that they know that there are some potential resources out there to help with these different challenges so that they don't become barriers to a student's learning? Look at your school's culture. It's very important. One thing, and I know it's really, really hard because I know there's a huge, huge teacher shortage right now, but then it's kind of a good time to look at your academic team, and while trying to fill positions and stuff, using this as an opportunity to make your academic team and academic leaders as diverse as your student population, because this makes going to school more meaningful for students because they're able to see themselves being represented in academic leadership roles. So if you're noticing that your academic team is not as diverse as it needs to be, then start coming up with a plan to make those changes, because it will be very beneficial to the school's culture, as well as making sure that you have programs and guidelines in place that really talk to the students as well as teachers and staff about the importance of inclusion and acceptance, and that there are different programs and resources in place to help students model that behavior and really understand it as a way to try to decrease students feeling left out or bullying and things like that can really affect the student's psyche and make them not want to come to school. Some other things that you can do is to check to see if, what kind of system is in place for identifying when a student is struggling academically. We all know the importance of early intervention. So what system do you have in place, or is it time to kind of update or look into a different resource to help teachers and other school personnel identify potential learning challenges, and then help students get back on track with that? Again, thinking about some of the struggles that we're starting to see more and more with, COVID and unemployment and stuff. Does your school have those connections with community members that address the food insecurity or clothing needs? I've heard of a school that the principal put two washing machines and dryers in the basement of the school and students that needed to wash clothes are able to, to do that right there at the school. And that was one way that he was able to decrease the amount of um, students that were absent because they had access to clean clothes where they didn't have that way to get clean clothes at home. They knew they can bring it to school without judgment and clean their clothes, and that helped out a lot. Another thing to look at is your communication system with parents and guardians, and making sure it's effective. I think, it's very easy to think about contacting a parent during those 9 to 5 hours and by phone, but, parents are working too. So what system do you have in place? Do you have an office hours, maybe, every now and then on the weekend or in a later evening, or, what other ways can you communicate with a parent, other than the traditional school hours where they may not be available because they're working? Um, Not everybody also, is really strong with email and stuff. So just making sure that you have different methods and modes for communicating with the parents and guardians, and then also taking into consideration any parents that may not be English first language speakers, and trying to figure out ways to close any communication gaps with that group of parents as well, to make sure that they're getting accurate information. And if they're unsure about something or have questions, they have a way to, share that information with you accurately. Um, Making sure that you have different programs and information for students that talks about different challenges that our students face nowadays. Substance abuse. We're seeing students in elementary school that are getting access to drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and vaping. So, does your school, especially if you're in an elementary or a younger setting, do you have the different resources and discussions with these students to not only talk to them about the challenges and dangers, but also if it's something that they're doing, how to get help in a non-judgmental way? Other topics include poverty, parent incarceration, mental illness. These are different, boulders that students are carrying with them and trying to keep up with learning and feeling like they're all alone. So making sure that you're including information, and some resources, and making it very accessible for students, and letting them know that, you know, we all have different challenges and issues, and it's okay, and that the school is a team for them. And if it's not something that you can provide in the actual school, you do have a community connection that you can point them to. Um, and then making sure that the school provides parents with the information about school absences. And I think it's on this next slide here. This is actual Title 22.1, and it is called the compulsory attendance required excuses and waivers. So this is one of the different guidelines that is put in place about attendance and chronic absenteeism and truancy. So if you look up Title 22.1, you can find all this information about these different topics. But in Section H, it says that schools within 1 calendar month of the opening of school, the school board should send to the parents and guardian of each student the copy of the compulsory school attendance law. So within that first month of school, this should be going home to the students, and it should be talking about, the what an excused and unexcused absence is, and what truancy is, and the procedures and policies for chronic absenteeism and truancy. Making sure that all parents receive that within 1 month of school opening. We're getting ready to open back up now. We have some that have opened up. So making sure that this is going home. And again, keeping in mind that we have diverse student populations. So making sure that it's sent home in different languages and formats for parents to be able to see and understand. And don't forget that we have some parents that are younger now, right? I'm starting to get older, so I'm slowly drifting out of that young parent category. But we live in a society that, everybody's on social media. So I suggest finding ways to include this on different social media platforms as another opportunity to make sure that parents see it and have access to it. All right. So when it comes to chronic absenteeism and truancy, the schools usually have a tiered system, just like we see when it comes to behavioral supports, right? The PBIS in the classrooms, or when it comes to learning. As a school system, we're really good with having our tiers for different things for us to grade and better pinpoint where a student falls. So for this subject, there are 3 levels. And this is the type of interventions that are in place. So for level 1, this is your basic, this is uniform. All students receive these supports. And that includes talking with the students and caregivers about the attendance. I just mentioned sending home that notice, as well as, talking about it on social media or at, a early school year pep rally in a classroom, whatever, but making sure that the caregivers and students are informed about the importance of attendance and what happens when they miss a lot of days. Making sure to recognize students for their efforts. And I think it's great that we have different things like the Perfect Attendance Award and, things like that. But keeping in mind that for some students, they may not have perfect attendance, but they work just as hard or harder. So finding ways to recognize those students as well. Doing your best to create welcoming and inclusive school climates, communicating with the caregivers when their student is absent, and I'm going to go into when that's supposed to be done according to that Title 22.1, and then addressing common challenges to attendance early, right? So we're all about that early intervention. As soon as you start noticing, this student has missed 5 days of school, I'm gonna go ahead and check in and just really make sure everything's okay. And see what we can do to keep this from intensifying. So that's across the board for all students. Then we get into level 2, which is our moderate category. And this is for students that have missed 10% to 19% of the school year. So this is when we set up those meetings with the caregiver and your attendance team and the student, and you sit down and you try to put all of the different reasons why this student is missing so much class on the table and come up with a personalized plan for them. You want to make sure that you have a good communication system that includes those measurable goals to allow the entire team to monitor and measure progress. And then another suggestion is to partner students with like an attendance buddy or mentor to help them with the situation and to help motivate them, or help them communicate any challenges they may have. And then that severe level is for the students missing more than 20%. So these students are missing a lot of school, right? If it's 20% in Virginia, that's 36 days of school that they've missed in the school year, at least. Well, for 20%, 36 days. So when it gets to this level, this is where we really, really, really want to make sure that we call in for those reinforcers and come up with a serious game plan to keep this from getting worse. So additionally, another reason why this is considered severe is because we already went through level 2, right? We already had that team meeting. We came up with the plan, we came up with the attendance money. We thought we were good to go, but the absences still keep accruing. So that's when you want to call in some of the public agencies, including the legal system, as a way to really put some emphasis on the importance of this issue. And then you want to go ahead and provide that intense case management and monitoring to monitor the progress, to see if there's anything changing, anything that was missed during the meetings in level 2 that can now be addressed to try to help this student. So these next slides are going over that Title 22.1, and I can send a copy of this out when we send the recording. I'm not going to read every single word, but this is just kind of putting it on there for everyone to see, and then just touching on some key points. So one thing is that according to this, every school board should has the responsibility of appointing one or more attendance officers. Now, a lot of times this is like your principal, but it can be somebody who the principal designates, or it can be some other school personnel, or it can be a volunteer. But the thing that is suggested is that it's not a somebody who directly teaches, as a way to kind of, keep lines from getting blurred, right? So every school board, you want to make sure that you have that attendance officer, and the attendance officer is going to be the one who, when we get into the next slide and stuff, when a student does not report to school, the attendance officer is the one who would contact the parent. Now, most school systems have like the automated phone calls and stuff, but again, the attendance officer would be the one responsible for making sure that the students' parents are informed that the student was not in school. All right. When this happens, it's traditional that the parents are notified by phone. But that's just for like the first absence or whatever, without like the notice from the parents showing that they were aware of the absence. Okay, so now let's say we have, and I think this might have cut off a little bit, that the student has had a total of 5, either 5 consecutive absences, or it's been throughout the school year, and these absences have not been accounted for by the parents. So you're not seeing like the notes from the doctor or whatever. This is when you want to go ahead, the attendance officer wants to go ahead and make that direct contact. Is usually through the phone. But again, if you don't get them through the phone, you want to try other ways. And this is when you really want to explain to them, hey, we're noticing we got 5 absences here. What's going on? How can we help? And then you want to go ahead and set up that meeting. Okay, so again, the early intervention, you want to try to do it as soon as possible. I'm not saying on the first, but when we get to like 5 like this of these unexcused absences, this is a good time to go ahead and set up that meeting. And during that meeting, you want to have the student and their parent or caregiver, and the attendance officer. And this is when you have that discussion and try to investigate what is going on. Where is the student when they're not in school? So now, after you've had that meeting, if the student is absent again for one additional day, and it's unexcused, this is when you're going to have that bigger meeting with the team. Okay, and this meeting needs to be scheduled within 10 days after the 10th absence of the pupil. So you have that meeting after the 5, and then the student still has another one. You're going to go ahead and contact the parent again, and talk about the plan, have the meeting with the plan and with the attendance team. And then once it gets up to that 10th absence, this is when within 10 days that you need to have that conference, and you're going to pull in everybody for the team. Okay. And again, I will share this actual title with everyone when we send out the recording so that you have a copy of it. Now, after all of this, if the absences still occur, whether it's because the student is doing it and the parent is not aware, or the parent is just intentionally ignoring and just intentionally non-compliant, this is when things are elevated to that level 3 severe level. And this is where within 10 days, the attendance officer will schedule that conference again, but also they can file that complaint with the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court. And this is when we get into the actual legal matters. So As you see, at first it starts with just, your basic conversation, and then it intensifies as the problem continues. And then, they also include that if the student has both parents that have joint custody, you want to make sure that both of the parents are notified and are taking part of this. And also there is a clause in here that protects the attendance officer, whether they're the principal or some other school official or a volunteer. It protects them from legal, consequences from a parent trying to be vindictive or anything. So that's all in that Title 22.1. So I mentioned having a good attendance team, and these are the key members that you want on your attendance team. Of course, you want the student, you want your school principal, you want that attendance officer there as well. You want the parent or guardian, the school social worker, we want the school nurse there in case we're talking about medical challenges and stuff. Again, the attendance clerk or the school secretary, any teachers that the student is assigned to, the school counselor, any district staff. A parent family liaison is a good idea because they can help with the communication and making sure the family understands and they feel comfortable with expressing their concerns and thoughts. When it escalates, or really at any point, depending on the situation, you can pull in some of your legal resources. And then again, depending on the situation, you may want to pull in some community support members if it is a organization or a community member that may be able to help address a specific problem that the student and their family are experiencing. All right, so to wrap it up, so now we've had this team, we understand, what the different absences are, we understand what the impact of missing so much school, how big that impact can be. So what do we do to get students back? Because we already also talked about identifying some changes you can make in your school to try to prevent it from happening. But if it's happening, how do we get the students back on track? So again, once we go through the plan and stuff, we want to make sure that we have a good communication system that is appropriate for the student and their caregivers, right? It's good to be like, oh yeah, you can call me anytime, or here's my email address, email me anytime. Really make sure that you are including in your communication system and plan methods that are beneficial to the family, right? So what's the best way to contact you? What's the best date and time? I even suggest setting up a specific day and time when you will have that communication so everybody can put it on their calendar. Making sure that you include the student in all planning to guarantee that their thoughts and concerns are included and their input is included to help them feel more invested in their change process, because change is hard. Pairing a student with a student buddy is a good idea. Making sure that you set up SMART goals, because when we're talking about getting on track with attendance and academic performance, because you want to make sure that these goals are specific and that they're measurable so that the whole team can look at the progress and agree where the student is. There's no confusion or, one person who's saying, yeah, good job, and the other one saying, well, no, I was expecting this. Making those specific measurable goals helps everybody stay on track, and it's a uniform critique system. You want to make sure that you celebrate progress and milestones, no matter how small they are. Remember, change is hard. And if students are going through any of those challenges I mentioned earlier, they're working really hard to get into that school every day. So taking time to check in with them and, celebrate and just talk with them and congratulate them and just let them feel like their efforts are being noticed. It's very important to keep data, but not just keep it and file it and, submit it when it's asked for. Review it often, and then take the time to compare your data with other schools in your jurisdiction or other jurisdictions and even other states as a good way to identify some changes you may need. And then lastly, network with other schools and jurisdictions, and again, states, to make sure that you're on top of the latest trends and to keep your ideas fresh and current. All right. So this here is all my contact info. As Tina mentioned earlier, this is being recorded, and the presentation will be emailed out to you. And I will also make sure that I send a copy of the Title 22.1 for everybody so that you have a copy of that. And I can also share that link to that video. So at this time, I am going to take a sip of my tea, and Tina, see if we have any questions.
I am going to stop the recording for the question and the Q&A portion. So give me just a moment to stop the recording.